tell you that I'm, with the update on exams, I finished grading all the written parts. I've just now started looking at the antibiotic stuff. And some people didn't really talk about mechanisms at all. So I'm looking at them. I should probably have those graded by I'm hoping by Thursday. So if I don't post them on Wednesday for you on Thursday, they'll be posted Thursday evening sometime. Okay? Good? Anybody else have any questions? Okay. So the last time we left, we had finished talking about the malaria life cycle. And so I wanted to talk about the different genera of mosquitoes that are found in Texas. I expect that you'll know these.
They're found what?
In Texas.
Huh?
Mosquitoes in Texas.
On Texas.
So the three different genera are Anopheles.
And these are types of mosquitoes in Texas?
The genera, Culex, and then Aedes. Okay? So if we look at this image, what we're looking up here is you can see that this is got a little stripes on the legs, and that's what makes this distinguishable from the other genera. This is Aedes. This is the most aggressive mosquito we have in Texas. This is the one that'll come at you, and you swat it, and it just comes right back. That's the male. The female is taking a blood meal while the male is getting your attention. Okay?
What's the Aedes?
Aedes.
Is that an A-E?
Aedes.
Did you say the female sucking your blood? Wow.
While the female is sucking your blood while the male is getting your attention.
Is that on purpose or just happenstance because there's thousands of mosquitoes around you?
I think it's on purpose. I think it's evolutionary.
Yeah.
Because the female is important, the male is not. The male has one job to do, and then he can be sacrificed, right?
And then this is the picture of the
Aedes.
Always a male.
So they're running around getting plant source food, what are nutrition, and then trying to mate, and that's it. And
That's
they're
it.
making a ruckus.
That's it.
Okay.
Males
Okay.
are always sacrificing the bud.
They are.
In other kingdoms too.
Yeah.
Why?
That's right.
I've noticed that for bugs that
Remember that.
like feed on people, it's
I'm well
the
aware.
females. It's always the females.
Listen, folks, evolutionary and biologically, the female is always more important than the male. Okay? Are you with me?
Tell that to my boyfriend.
Right?
It's being recorded, you can tell him that, right? Because the female has the power to bring life into this world.
But not without the male.
You're right, but you could use any male. Like, if there's 20 females and one male, the male has a job, right? And the males know that. So in the animal world, the males are always fighting for the attention of the female, right? We are about to go into rut right now. And so if you don't know what that is, if you see deer in your front yard, you need to leave them the hell alone.
They're crazy.
I was walking my dog one time and I had a female attack me.
What's Brett?
Rut is
Mating season.
mating season for
Oh,
you.
maybe she thought you were cute.
Oh, well, I never thought of it that way.
It's
Do we need to
kinda
know what
scary.
rut is for the example?
What's that?
Do we need to know what rut is for the example?
No, only what's related to micro, right? Remember, I try to bring in little stories and things to keep your attention while I'm talking. So here is, again, we're just gonna go over the malaria a little bit. So here is red blood cells, and you can see the malaria parasite inside of the red blood cells. This is another rendition, so you can see that's normal, this is infected. All those in there are the Metazoans, also known as the trophozoites. Okay? very complicated life cycle. We've talked about this already. Here it is for you again. I'm not gonna go over it, we already have, because I wanna go ahead and talk about sickle cell. Okay, so sickle cell is an evolutionary mutation against malaria. So what happened here is that the mutation occurred, and with the people who show that mutation, their blood becomes sickle shaped like this. Now, this particular morphology of the red blood cell is not, the malaria parasite does not recognize it as being infectable. So anybody who has sickle cell or carries the trait for sickle cell does not get malaria. However, if you carry the trait for sickle cell is worse than malaria. Okay, so a lot of people, used to be that people didn't survive very long if they had sickle cell. Nowadays, we have all kinds of ways to treat it. And as a matter of fact, there have been 3 clinical trials. 2 of them were positive for the elimination of sickle cell genes in persons' bodies. One of them is, it looks like it's gonna fail. Yeah, he hasn't.
Okay, you said that if you have malaria, you're more likely to get sickle cell, or is it if you have sickle cell, you're more?
No, the other way around. If you have sickle cell, you'll never get malaria.
Okay.
I worked at a hospital and there was a deaf mute patient that had sickle cell and she was undergoing treatment. She had a blockage. And
So
the
that-
sounds that she made were the worst noises I've ever heard in my life. She was
So,
in so much pain.
unfortunately, yeah, let me just show you that real quick. So, because of the shape of the red blood cell, they don't carry nutrients or oxygen or CO2 away from the body very effectively. But the other thing that can happen is that those sickle-shaped red blood cells can actually cause clots, can cause blood blockage. And that can lead to horrible pain, right? And so we now have ways to treat it, and we might have a way to cure it. It's still, of course, it's still being researched.
Is it really expensive too?
It will be expensive. Okay? Good. Evolution doesn't get it right all the time. Right? So we always think of evolution as being positive. For the most part, it is. But sometimes the evolutionary path brings us to a point where, okay, this isn't really good. And those traits are not supposed to be transmitted in progeny, right? They're not supposed to be transmitted in offspring, right? But in this case, you know, if you have a child with somebody who carries a trait and you carry the trait, then you could have a child with sickle cell. Okay? Questions? All right, so let's talk about the big guys now. So if we think about the large organisms, they belong to the animal kingdom. They're the platyhelminths, which are the flatworms, and the nemahelminths, which are the roundworms. They're true worms, okay? So if we think about, they're all chemoheterotrophic, they're all multicellular, they all have reduced digestive nervous system, and they all can move. They're all ingestive and absorptive for their nutrient intake. They have very elaborate life cycles, right? Remember, all the parasites have developed these very elaborate life cycles so that they're hard to destroy, right? And so it's pretty interesting to think about. This is one of those mechanisms in nature that these group of organisms have come up with to make it harder for us to get rid of them, right? And that's pretty cool to think about, right? And they all can form embryos, right? Unlike the protozoans that we just saw, they never formed embryos. However, what they have in common with the metazoans is that they have a very elaborate life cycle. Okay. So we're going to look at 3 different groups, right? The trematodes, which are the flatworms, or flukes, right? The cestodes, which are also flat, and they are the tapeworms. The tapeworms are really nothing more than what we call a head. We call it the scolex, and a whole bunch of sections. And each one of those sections, Anayeli, have the capacity to produce and fertilize their own ova. Okay? And then we have the true worms, the roundworms, and we'll talk about them also. Okay? So if we think about the major part, they all have very elaborate life cycles, but the major parts of the life cycle that we look at diagnostically are the ova, the fertilized ova, and the adult, right? Some adults are fairly large, some are very small, but we can still look at them and we can identify them based on their morphological characteristics. Okay? So when we talk about sex with these organisms, they all have sex. They all produce very unique, genetically different offspring. But the way they do it is a little bit different, right? We have these two terms, monaceous and dioecious, that describes how they reproduce, right? Monaceous is one organism, but in that one organism, they have both sex organs, right? And so if we think about that for a minute, then these are organisms that have the ability to produce and fertilize their own ova. And so in general, the Trematoda and the Cestota are monaceous, okay? In general, the Nematoda are dioecious. Dioecious means you have a female and a male gender, okay? So they have to have some type of interaction in order to fertilize their ova. Yep,
So you said that the trematodes and the cestodes are
monaceous.
monaceous,
Now that's in general, Tay, because there are
Certain.
exceptions to everything, okay?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about one of those in just a minute. So if we look at here, this is a liver fluke. This is what it looks like. So you can see it's pretty simple in design, but it's complicated, right? So if we look at this, right, we have a mouth, we have an oral sucker. These two tubes that go bilaterally, transversely throughout the entire organism are the intestines, right? So they suck on blood, that blood gets to the intestines, the blood is broken down, and then the nutrients are transferred to the organism's cells, okay? So here,
Like a leech? The leech is-
a leech will fall into the category, but it's not one of the ones I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay? So here you can see that it's the anus, right? And so here are the testes, here's the seminal vesicle and the ovary, and then this is the uterus, and in the uterus you can see there are many fertilized ova
Which one is
ready to be distributed. Uh-huh.
Which one is the ovary on this bee?
So the ovary is right here, and there's the
Oh.
seminal vesicle.
Huh?
Okay? Good? So it also has a ventral sucker, so the way these things attach to our intestines or to whatever, liver or whatever, is that they just simply attach like this, and they have an oral and a ventral sucker that they attach to. They're very hard to get rid of. Okay?
An oral and a ventral.
Sucker.
Why do I not know what ventral is right now? I'm tired.
This is
On
ventral.
the back.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay? Good? All right, so if we think about it, then this is the liver fluke, and so here it is. Here you can see in this particular animal, you can see that there are many fluke, yes? And so if we think about this for just a moment, these are caliculi. The human body and all animal bodies are very interesting. If they can't get rid of something, they sequester it. And the way they sequester it is they form calcifications around them.
Sequester it means what?
Seal them off,
Okay.
okay?
How do you spell this?
Seal, S-E-A-L, seal.
Sequester?
Don't worry about
Okay.
it. So, it's just, I just get excited and I start using big words.
seal?
Seal is okay. Seal it off.
Oh, seal it.
So if I'm sealing something, I'm covering it.
You
Okay.
said it calcifies them?
Calcifies. And these are all calcifications. We call them calicula. Okay? So you can see how these things have been calcified. Now, what happens is a lot of times with our beef industry, we have meat inspectors. And what they do is they go to the meat packing plants, and when they come in, they'll ask a question, how many cattle are you processing today? And they might say 1,000, and they'll say, go ahead and cull out 100 of the herd for me, right? They'll do it at random, then they'll go in and they'll pick a certain amount, and then as they're being processed, what they'll do is they'll take a knife and they'll just cut the liver, and any of the flukes come out of the liver, then those animals cannot be used for human consumption, but we can use them for other animal food like cat or dog food.
Huh.
Okay?
What?
No,
Those
just
seem safe.
why give them to cats or dogs if we can't give them to ourselves?
Because we as humans will say no, the dog and cat won't say no.
But
Okay?
are they dangerous for the dog?
No, because the meat is gonna be processed. It's gonna be cooked before it gets sold. It's not really even bad for us, but
We're scared of them.
that's what happens. And so if it got out that we are selling meat products to people that are parasitized, oh, there'll be a, you know, big problem.
Most of the time they cook out, but there are some things that you don't wanna mess with.
Yeah. If you eat wild game,
The white,
you want to be sure that you cook the meat thoroughly.
If you what?
Because almost all wild game is gonna
Oh,
be,
raw meat?
is gonna come in contact with parasites. You can't help it, they're in the wild, okay? Good? So we have to understand that, and I like venison, but I'm cooking that thing all the way through. I like venison sausage, yum yum.
Venison
But-
tartar.
Huh?
I'm kidding.
You just need to be sure you understand.
I saw how that was made the other day and it was, ugh.
So one of my friends in the farmer world sent me, I have to show it to you, she bought a nice, big, beautiful steak at one of the local grocery stores. And when she cooked it up, she cut into it, and there was some tendon in the steak, and the tendon flopped around when it was cooking like a worm. And she went berserk. I mean, she went, oh my God, she took pictures, she sent them to me. She said, is this a worm? I'm like, no, it looks like a tendon. She did not believe that it was a tendon. So she would not eat that. Not as a matter of fact, she wouldn't eat meat for a while after that, because she saw the worm. It was a tendon. I have a picture of it somewhere where she sent it to me.
But it was
Like
for
the
real,
fish.
why was it moving?
Because the heat was making it move, right? Yeah. So.
Like the fish that start flopping
Yeah.
when
These
they're cooking.
this is, some animal tissue here, right?
Liver, it's a liver.
It's a liver, so
Mhm.
the calcifications are going around the current living worm.
Correct, flatworm.
Flatworm,
Yes.
the worm doesn't try to pick up and move or.
Can't, it's
Can't.
sequestered, I mean, it is sealed.
So what are the holes?
That happens quickly?
The hole is, yeah, no, well, over time.
Okay.
But if you think about it, and you're a fluke and you're in the liver, and all of a sudden you get, there's calcifications forming on both sides.
Yeah.
And if you're not moving real quick, you can get stuck there pretty quickly, right? Yeah. Yep,
So Trematota and, liver fluke and flatworm are like interchangeable terms?
so, Trematota is the class. Fluke is the common name. And if we think about, what was the other thing you asked?
A flatworm?
That is just a real common grouping of them.
Okay, and then Trematota falls under which one of those three there? Or have we totally moved on from that?
Those are mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, okay, thank you.
So, here is the liver fluke, and it can affect all portions of the hepatic portal system. Okay? It's not just in the liver, it can be anywhere in the hepatic portal system. Gall, biliary, whatever. Okay? Good? So, very complicated life cycle. Check this out. Now, you're not gonna be expected to know the life cycle, but I might ask you, the liver fluke can infect what? And the best answer is gonna be hepatic portal system. Okay, on the next slide. Here you can see it involves a snail and a fish and a human, right? So the snail and the fish, if you think about them, they're primary and secondary host, where the human is the definitive host. The other way you can look at those are intermediate hosts. Okay? So therefore, in the United States, is it safe to eat sushi?
Not if you're pregnant.
Okay, well, because of listeria and a bunch of other things, right? But if you are in the United States, it's really, really safe to eat sushi.
Nobody did.
Raw sushi?
Raw sushi.
You said it is safe?
It is safe.
Why is it safer here?
Because sushi is very expensive. And if they want you to come back because they want you to be a repeat customer, they're gonna make sure that anything they serve you is gonna make you feel like you wanna come back.
But in other
Frozen
countries.
first?
I'm not gonna say, other places, not so much. okay?
So you can freeze it and it kills everything, right?
Nope.
No, that's a lie.
Freezing does not kill.
It just
Okay.
retards.
It just slows down the growth.
Retards.
Stops it, okay?
Stops it.
Until you eat it.
It's very interesting because a lot of places I know have been like, ours is really safe because we flash freeze it and it kills everything. And now,
I mean.
well,
you
now
what
we
you
know.
right?
Now we know. But
Well, most people don't know the difference between what freezing does and what sterilizing does.
But I thought like the 80-degree temperatures, like, for the bacteria in the lakes and things, like if it's under that, they're not really thriving and stuff.
80 degrees?
Yeah, you're like,
Oh,
don't get
no,
a lake
they're
that's
thriving.
80 degrees or above.
All the way 80, no, bacteria.
What about below?
Well, what temperature are you, Miss Samantha?
98.6.
And there are bacteria in you thriving.
Yeah, I'm saying, but it's frozen, so those bacteria can't thrive.
You're right. They're not growing like gangbusters, but they're still alive and they're still growing, just really slow. Take that out and put it down in your meat area in the refrigerator, and they'll start growing again. Or leave it out on your tabletop or your counter, and they'll start growing again.
The same applies, what you said at the beginning of the semester, that like 80% of those are not harmful to you.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Trying to-
So again, if you think about that for a minute, what's more dangerous, hamburger meat or a steak?
Steaks.
Hamburger meat,
Why?
because there's different kinds of meat in it.
And it's got a lot of surface area. Where a steak, it's only two sides. So if the bacteria are gonna be contaminating this, if you've salmonella on that steak and you cook both sides, salmonella's gonna die. But if you cook the hamburger meat and you don't cook it all the way through, salmonella will survive. I never eat anything but a well-cooked hamburger.
I was
Give me,
like- I
give me a
thought you were
little
gonna say
pink,
that on a
give me a
steak.
pink steak that's a little bloody any day.
Hmm.
But hamburger meat has to be cooked all the way through.
I'm a risk taker.
I mitigate this.
Did you say that the snail and the fish are the secondary hosts? and the
Primary,
fish is the
secondary.
Primary?
Primary, secondary.
Why is I thought humans are the primary,
No, we are the definitive.
definitive, which means.
We are the final
end
host.
goal?
Yep.
Okay.
What do you think about the people that are taking that, it's not Parafan. It's some
Ivermectin?
kinda- No, it's I guess in a sense, but you can go to like, Whole Foods or something like that and buy it.
What
It's
is
being recommended by holistic doctors,
For
so
what?
it's like a it says para on it and then something else, and they take it to do a parasite cleanse. Paragard, yeah, it's Paragard.
I never heard of it. What is it?
I don't know, I have no idea. They just say to take it for like 3 weeks and you'll cleanse your body of
Is it
parasites.
over the counter?
It's supposed
Yeah.
to like flush out the parasites.
Yeah, you saw that video on TikTok?
Has anybody, okay, do not believe what you see on TikTok.
I
But-
don't, but I
But
just
listen,
thought,
so have you tried it?
I have not. I'm not putting anything in my body. If there's parasites in there, I'm a lipstick.
I need to know what it is. So you can buy it at Whole Foods?
Yeah, it's called, or you can buy it like many places.
So Paragard is the trade name. What's in it?
I think I give my dog some.
Yeah, because I remember.
Zach Zoller,
Yeah,
Paragard,
my dog's
Advanced
Paragard
Intestinal
sounds
Support.
familiar.
Not for me, but.
But what's in it?
Pattern.
Active ingredient. What's active ingredient?
And
C
truly
is what it
copper
is.
contraceptive.
It's,
Oh, this might be.
Bindazole.
Also an IUD.
And-
It's weird. Maybe that's where I got it.
You give it to dogs.
I just didn't know if it had any correlation with the parasites, like if
I have
it's.
no- I've
She
never
said
heard
like
of
her
it.
mom.
So I tell you what I will do. In the next 2 weeks or so, I will go buy this stuff and I will decide whether or not I want to try it. And if I do try it, I will record my journey.
Oh.
The Paragard?
Not that journey, okay?
The Paragard? They said you can actually see things.
I doubt that very
But
much.
I
Like
don't
people
know.
are
It
breaking
says
up their
that-
poop with like a chopstick and finding like worms in it.
She said
And
she
they're
can see
saying
it every
also
time she
that we're one of the only countries that does not like do a regular dewormer, that most of the cultures have like, some spices or something that's anti-parasitic, and we don't.
Do you
look like
deworm
that
in
here.
Germany?
No, sir.
Do you deworm in Poland? Do you deworm in Vietnam? You do? What do you do?
We took like some pills, and like when before we get to primary school, we have some pill that we put in our anus.
Oh, like a suppository.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say.
Huh.
Okay, so 4 countries, 3 of them don't, 1 of them does.
I feel
Okay?
like it's also just depending on like the resources that you have or what you're eating. Like, if we,
I have dewormed before, but only because my family member had pinworms, and therefore I took an antihelminthic.
yeah.
But nothing came out. I checked. I didn't use chopsticks, but I looked around. I didn't find anything. When she said they're looking chopsticks, I'm like, okay, you know. Yeah.
Found a Paragard on Amazon. It says,
That's what I'm on.
unique blend of herbs, including
And
wormwood, pumpkin
wormwood,
seed,
yeah.
garlic bulb, and more.
That's the one I found.
Well, okay.
I'm gonna send you one that's Panicure C, and it's talked about in health books.
Okay, do it. And I'll see if I can, I will test it on myself. First, I'm gonna read, make sure that it's not toxic. But then I will test it on myself. Yes,
So this would be, I was on TikTok, looking at it, right? And then, there's a lady who like posted a video of like a picture
TikTok?
of her like, over the sister or whatever it is. You wanna see it? You wanna see it? It's right here.
can you just send it to me and I'll send it to everybody?
Okay. Why? You want to see it?
But if not a tick, but don't give me a TikTok,
Is it
okay?
poop? I want to see the worm.
On my Facebook page, you can find a video of an 8-year-old young lady who's having surgery to remove a scarus lumbocoides. And the physicians that are in there doing the surgery are just pulling them out by the tens. I mean,
Her intestines.
there's hundreds of worms in her intestines. And the reason they had to have surgery is because she was impacted. She could not go to the bathroom. She was so impacted by these worms. There was
Wow.
a bunch of them.
Where did they come from? Why did she get those?
So
Like,
sad.
Don't touch her. Shaking hands. That's how you do it.
Really?
This morning when I got here, I went to the bathroom and it was full. All the stalls were full, and so I was washing my hands. And then the 2 gentlemen got out and left and did not wash their hands. I'm like, really?
It's always
I will say.
Sometimes, hey, sometimes women, I've been in the bathroom before where like, I can hear that they are not washing. I'm like, girl, come on.
I know earlier in class that they just think you can use hand sanitizer, it's gonna be all right.
Or their
Oh, yeah,
genes just.
no. Okay, let's go on. So here is the blood fluke. So the blood fluke breaks all the rules of the worm rule. The worm rule says females are always bigger because they're gravid, all right? The second rule of the worm rule is, yes,
Well, we need to know those scientific names.
that's gonna be up to you all to decide.
No.
You can't just say Isabella rules and says no. You have to talk to your colleagues,
I vote with
Isabella.
Isabella, I vote with Isabella.
Well, okay, it can't be Isabella and L rule. You know, you have to talk to your colleagues. Okay, but for right now, all right, let's just talk about this, right? So the rules of the worm rule, the female is always larger because she's gravid, okay?
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
Ooh, it's a beautiful word. Look, I want to spell it for you. Gravid means with egg.
Is it 2
Uh-huh. She's gravid, okay? The second rule of the worm rule says that trematode and cestode are monoecious, nematodes are dioecious. Those are the rules, okay? There's exceptions to everything. This one breaks the rules. This is Schistosoma mansoni. The male, there he is, look at him, isn't he cute? He's very large. And the female is little diminutive. She crawls inside of him to undergo fertilization of the ovum. Okay? Interesting. So the male is protecting her the whole time. Yeah. Isn't that cool? Here you can see She's disembarking from her duties. She's leaving them.
And then does she eat him?
No, no.
No, that's a picture of the female coming out of the male right there on the top right.
Yeah, there's a male, that's a female, and here's the male, there's a female right there. Isn't that cool?
I was just thinking of that scene.
So
in
we
Step
don't
Brothers.
have this organism in the United States, but it is found in other countries. And the way you can pick it up is by wading in some water that's contaminated with this. There's another organism that's called the New Guinea worm. Anybody ever heard of that? The New Guinea worm is the one that gets into your skin like this, but then it gets really big. And the female, when she gets excited because you're splashing around the water, will stick her head out of the skin and find out you're in the water, and then she'll let her genital pore come out and she'll release all the ova into the water. But that's the only time she'll release it. So,
And then pop up on that.
all over the place, all over.
Is it-
Yep.
Isn't with those like, I think it's the same thing, but the guy actually had to wear like a special little covering for his genitals
No, that,
because it could swim up.
that's Wishiera bancrofti.
Oh,
That's
in
different.
the Amazon.
So this, the one I'm talking about, right, the New Guinea worm, it's called Draniculus. What they'll do to get it out is they'll take a twig and they'll roll it out really, really slow of the body, because it can be pretty large.
Where in the body does it go?
It can be anywhere, but usually it's gonna be on the lower extremities because it needs, when you're wading in water.
There's video of that.
Yeah, there's one, that's one of the organisms, we're trying to get rid of it from the planet. And we're pretty close. I think there's only 2 countries now that have it.
Where would you say those?
I can't remember.
Not here?
No, not here. But what they'll do to get the female excited is they'll have the person step in a bucket of water. And the female will think, oh, and she'll come out and then they'll start to roll her out of there. It's really great.
Why roll her?
Because if you break her, all the ova will be released inside the body. And you don't want that to happen. Okay. Yes, ma'am?
Oh, I was just gonna ask you where location wise.
You can look it up. New Guinea worm. Okay? All right, this is Fasciola hepatica. It's huge. It's about the size of my hand. So you can, the liver can only take a few of these things, right? They're huge. And so the liver enzymes will just go crazy when you have this organism, right? And so again, you can see how the body's trying to seal it off so that it doesn't hurt the liver, but by this point, the liver's already affected. Now, the liver is pretty cool. You can kill these things, but then they might stay in the liver, but the liver will heal itself over time. It's the only organ that can regenerate.
It's really cool.
If you and I are best friends and you need liver, I can give you half of mine and I'll send you okay.
Yeah,
So you-
or isn't that like you need to have at least like a third or something?
Yeah,
left?
I don't remember what the
And a fully,
percentage
like,
is.
a full liver forms out of that.
So you said it is the
Yeah.
only
And they
organism that
generally
allows
take
the
that.
liver to heal?
To regenerate. Okay? All right, let's go on to tapeworms. So the tapeworms are pretty simple in design. It's got what we call a scolex. You and I would call it a head. And the scolex can have suckers or it can have hooks and suckers. Okay? And that's how it attaches, right? So if you think about this, let me have your intestines. Here. Hold it up. It'll come in, and if it's got suckers, what it'll do, it'll just grab on. If it has hooks, it comes in first, sticks its hooks in it, then it applies its suckers. And now, it's not gonna let go. Okay? And because the organisms are monoecious, what does that mean, Jess? Yes, what does it mean, Samantha?
That it has both the
Okay.
female and the male sex.
So you never really only have one tapeworm, right? You can have multiple. Because once they get there, they will fertilize and they will produce and fertilize their own ova. Some of them get passed out, but some of them can stay in and they can start to grow. Yep,
This is a very stupid question, but
no
with
such thing.
tapeworm, or with the mono,
Uh-huh.
they have both sex organs
Yes.
technically. Do they just grow like extensions onto themselves, or is it a whole new worm?
All extensions onto themselves. And if you break them apart, they don't regenerate. They're not like planaria. Right, planaria, if you cut them in half, they'll just grow 2. If you cut them in 4, they'll just grow to 4. No, these are not earthworms at all. They
No,
don't,
I thought the planaria is a
no,
planaria.
no, planaria look kind of like, they're flatworms, and they look kind of like this. They're little tiny things. We had a whole bunch of them in my biology class up there. I should have taken pictures and shown them to you. There was a ton of them.
You can break those apart and they'll grow.
Cut them, shred them, they'll just grow a whole bunch. Yep.
So, I knew this person, they were like really poor, so they couldn't afford to take their animals to the vet. And maybe this is TMI, but one of their animals, I think it was a cat or a dog, I can't remember, I was really young, had really bad worms. And they would shine a light on their butt and they would come out.
I've never heard of that.
I
So,
didn't know what it
pinworm,
was.
we'll get to pinworms in a minute. We'll talk about pinworms.
Is that
in a
most
minute.
likely probably?
No, it was probably Ascaris or something.
Mhm.
We'll talk about those things in a minute. Yes, ma'am. I've never heard about the light there. Come into the light. It's like poltergeist. Come into the light. You know, no, that doesn't work. Yep.
In the picture in the lower right, with the little sections there, which each contains the male and female.
And those things are called proglottids.
Right, they all break off and fall apart?
They
at
can
first?
break off and fall apart.
Okay,
And sometimes you can see those in the feces,
okay.
right?
The little rectangular pieces or the?
Yep,
like
these
the-
little things.
But the primary worm that's still stuck inside your
It's
intestines,
still stuck
still
in-
feeding,
That's-
still making these things?
Yeah, and it'll stay there until you take an anti-helminthic drug, paralyze it, and it just releases and then the whole worm comes out.
Yeah.
So when I was 15, I got hired as an intern at a hospital, Spawn Hospital in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I was the traction technician. I was the youngest ever traction technician. But I also love pathology, so I would always take specimens from patients from one room down to the pathologist, or down to the basement in the morgue. We had a morgue, right? That's where they did autopsies. And the pathologist and the orthopedist loved me because I would do, like for the orthopedist, I'd do all the tractions, whatever, I'd do all, they loved me. They would call me on from their boat and say, hey, can you take your, you know, whatever. But the pathologist loved me also because I always went, like when I had free time, I would go down and have dinner with the pathologist, right? We would have hamburgers or whatever and talk bugs, right? Talk whatever. But one time they were paging me on the line. I'm like, who's paging me? So I went on there and they said, Felix, this is Doc Smith. Oh, hey, Doc. Come on down to the morgue, man. You have to see something. I went down there. They had an 80-foot long tapeworm that they had taken out of a patient. 80 feet long. We measured it. It was huge.
Was that the cause of death?
Right?
They got another reason.
You have
You have a lot of intestines, are you?
It was just all coiled up in their intestine?
Yeah. And they didn't know it was there. When they were doing an autopsy, they found it, right? Plus others, right? And so it's pretty interesting. Yes. How do you what?
How do you not realize?
Yeah.
I mean,
You'll never know if you have a tapeworm unless you just start losing a lot of weight or you become anemic.
But isn't that a possibility with an 80? What
But you're pregnant too.
Isn't that a possibility?
Told me that I don't
How
have a
long was
tapeworm.
it?
80 feet.
Don't let her know
So how do you
It was,
not
it was a
realize?
big person.
You have a
Could
lot
go
of
unnoticed.
intestines.
Well, I understand.
He was a
Like
big
that,
person.
yes.
The deceased was a big person.
Like 600-pound big?
I don't know about that. No, it wasn't that big. It was
I'm
probably.
thinking someone that doesn't go to the doctor routinely.
Correct.
Okay.
He died of cardiac arrest. And they were making sure of that, but then they were checking everything else and they found us. Yep.
It is crazy that.
Two questions.
Yep.
So for, the proglottids, that is the rectangular piece that he asked about. And then, so it says they break off in feces, go back into the environment, then they're ingested. Like, where are?
But
we
you don't
eating
even
these?
need to ingest the proglottid. All you need to do is ingest the ova.
And where are these? Are we handshaking again, or like where?
Fruits and vegetables.
Y'all won't touch me. Nobody touches me.
Yes, Al?
So the scolex is the head and the proglottis is like the body essentially.
Yeah, but you have to think about each of the proglottids as its own body.
Yeah, as like its own
Because each
structure.
of them are doing the exact same thing.
But proglottids do not have a scolex.
No.
Okay. And so you see the children in other countries on the horrible commercials, and their bellies are so distended.
That's
and they're starving.
schistosomiasis, that's different.
Okay, that's not from a
That,
parasite.
well, it can be malnutrition, but there's another parasite, I'm not gonna talk about it. But
Okay.
it's called schistosomiasis. You can look it up. Okay?
And the example we're looking at here is Tania sp. Tania sp.
This is Tania.
Wait, so Proglottis doesn't have a scolex?
One more time?
Proglottis doesn't have a scolex?
No, there's only one scolex, it's right there. Every one of these is a proglottid,
Oh, okay.
okay? So the other organism that probably is with the distended is called leishmaniasis. Okay? Because I am gonna talk about, I did talk about schistosoma, I just didn't talk about leishmania. Okay, there's a lot of bad bugs out there. Many of them are not found here. Okay? You should be lucky. Good? All right, now, a while back, 15 years ago, I had a collector's permit. And I never wanted to take an animal out of nature, but what I would tell my students is, if you see a fresh kill possum or coon, let me know. My student would call me up, Proving, there's a dead possum at the corner of Manchac and Slaughter Lane. And I would go down there, and I would pick it up, and I would bring it in, and we would dissect it in class. That would be our lab for that day. Now, ACC won't let me do that anymore, right? Because, you know, they're afraid that I'm gonna infect everybody. So I get it, right? But this is kind of what we would see. With one possum, they're cute little things. But with one possum, we had over 63 different parasites.
What?
It was fun to dissect these things.
And Kate possum.
They're beautiful animals. They don't hurt you.
One ran after me
They just
while I was in a booth.
They just sit there.
It was messed up. I was
We
just
would
walking,
crap
mind
in
my
our
own
yard.
business. Then it just like charged me.
They try to get into our house. So we keep it
Oh,
trapped.
so they don't get in our house because we have 3 compost piles in the backyard. But we have a game camera and they all visit and they're just feasting on it. And then they just eat all day.
I hate them and I hate raccoons.
The raccoons are getting very aggressive at my house.
They're always aggressive.
They're
like
coming up to
gangsters
the
of the
window
animal.
and tapping on the window, because they want
know.
they want the cat to come to the window. The cat comes to the window and she goes, and then the possum goes, and they're like fighting through the glass. I'm like,
They're
oh my
really,
God.
really smart.
And my wife said, because it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're like, I'm like, what the hell is going on over there? She goes, it's the coon and Misty are fighting again.
My cat.
My cat,
my
Misty,
cat's
which
never
she
been.
adopted my wife, but when she sees the coon coming, she'll start warning us. What the hell is going on over there?
They're really smart.
Misty hates the coon, and the coon hates Misty, and so they're fighting. And Misty like at the window, you know, like she's trying to get at her.
My dog has some kind of vendetta against
So
skunks.
they could be friends. The Pocahontas, the raccoon, and the
Yeah.
dog could be friends. For you to play that in your living room.
So this is Tania saginata. It is the beef tapeworm. Now it's called the beef tapeworm because that's when it was first characterized from, that animal. But it can infect all other types of animals. This is not a cow, right?
It's a dog.
As a dog.
So, I remember several years back when my dog was still alive, my wife called me from the park and she said, you need to come down to the park real quick. I'm like, what's going on? Just come down here, right? And she was like mad at me. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I went down there and there was my wife with the dog, and the dog was looking kind of scared. But she said, Bandy's got worms. I'm like, the dog. I said, how do you know that? She goes, look, and out the anus looked like this. It was coming out. And she looked at me and she said, you're the microbiologist. And I looked at it and I'm like, I just started pulling it out, just very slowly, pulling it out, because it wasn't a worm. Bandy likes oils, or she liked oils when she was alive. And we used a lanolin kind of, and she loved them. She would eat the tissues. And somehow or another, we got lucky, and they got all wound up in her intestines. They went through her intestines, and they were coming out. We just got lucky they didn't open up, because we would have been having surgery. But I was just pulling it out, and the dog, I'm like just pulling it. And then my wife said, "Be sure you wash your hands." Right? That's just the way it is. But you can see, if I had done this and then shook your hand, Samantha, then
Nope.
there would be all
Never
kinds
shake
of
your
things.
hands with anybody again.
This is Taniosolium. Taniosolium is the pork tapeworm, because that's the first organism it was characterized as infected, right? It has not only suckers, but it has hooks also. Look at those hooks. It's amazing. Right? These are Mother Nature's little babies.
Can you point out the hooks?
Hooks. See 'em? Good. But those guys are incidental. They get in your body just by luck. This boy, this guy, is a bad boy. And it's really causing trouble with our immunocompromised patients right now. And so in the early days of the AIDS, HIV, the beginning of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, a lot of people were coming down with Echinococcus granulosum, this thing. And the docs, the physicians, the epidemiologists didn't know what to do, so they called the large animal vet and say, "What do you do with this?" And the large animal vet said, "We just shoot them," right? Because there was no way to treat them effectively. We're not gonna do that, right? But you can see how they form these little egg sacs in the abdominal cavity, but really they can be anywhere. They've been known to be in the brain and any place else. And when you go in there, the only way to get in there and get rid of this stuff is to go in there and resect them. But if you nick the egg sac, you're gonna be releasing a whole bunch of larvae into the body, and that's not good.
What is a hydatid?
Hydatid sans is, it is the tapeworm that's everted. So usually the tapeworm is like this, and so it can attach, right? So this way, it's kind of upside down, but it still has the possibility of attaching itself to you. And once it does that, it turns over, and now it's got onto you, and then it starts to grow.
So what I'm hearing are different by shape
And structure.
and structure.
Okay? Yes, yes,
So
sir?
the parasitized is the small intestine of canids?
Canines.
Canines, dogs, okay.
Oh.
And
But-
that
but-
top picture is the actual worm, or?
This is the sac.
Yes.
So I don't have a picture of it. It's,
That's the sac in the top one too?
that's the sac also.
Okay.
So inside of them are the worms, the tapeworms. It's real small. It's got a scolex, and if I was to draw it for you, it would have a scolex. The scolex would have hooks and suckers, and then it would have two immature proglottids and one mature proglotid. That's what it would look like. And I'm not really a fantastic drawer, but you could look it up and see what the morphology is. Yes,
So is hydatid
Hydatid.
disease, is it just having the eggs in the sacs, or
no,
does it actually do
it's
something?
them being dispersed inside the body.
Which causes what?
Death.
How long does it take
For what?
for that all to initially come out
Months.
of burst?
Months.
It's huge.
If it was showing up in their HIV patients early on back in the 80s, does that mean like the people without HIV were able to fight it off themselves or their immune system?
We think that is the case because we see very little infections of Echinococcus in healthy patients. That's a good point to make.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, this is what the proglottids look like in poo. Now, this is kitty poo, right? But it can look, one time when I was working for CPL, I had a patient come in, and they said, little Johnny has a metabolic imbalance trouble. I said, why? Well, because he can't digest rice. I'm like,
Oh.
you know, rice are carbohydrates. You put them in your mouth and they'll digest pretty quickly, right? Go into your small intestine, they're gone. So she pulled out a little poopy bag with little Johnny's poopy in it And it was full of those things. And I said, okay. So she said, so do you think these are rice? I'm like, let me, because, you know, like, you can't say anything to the patient. You have to tell the doctor. So I went back to the doc and told the doc, I said, little Johnny does not have a metabolic imbalance. Little Johnny has tapeworms. And she looked, she goes, oh. So she prescribed an anti-helminthic drug, and then the worm was the tapeworm was taken out of the body. Through just normal processes, it just got pooped out.
So the anti-helminthics don't actually kill the
They paralyze it.
organism, they paralyze it so it can't latch onto anymore,
Correct.
and then they go out.
How do you spell that anti-health?
Anti-helminthic.
Did not talk about that in pharmacology, that's
Weird.
Anti-helminthic. Yes.
So if you see that amount of poo compared to,
That's a little bit of poop.
yes,
Okay.
but do you feel like this is like a big infestation? Like, can you judge that by looking at this little amount of poo and?
I wouldn't know. I would say that cat has at least one tapeworm.
So you can't really say how bad it is.
But kitties can be treated with anti-helminthics also. So you would know shortly thereafter. Okay? Questions?
We'll sample them.
All right. Roundworms, the true worms. Here we go. Are you ready? So, again, on my Facebook page for this class, there is a video of this young girl getting operated on and a bunch of worms being taken out. This is an image of an individual who had a lot of worms. It was causing impaction. And what they did was they gave anti-helminthic drugs to paralyze all the worms, and they gave an enema, and then out they came, right? And so you can see how this, so the problem with these organisms is when they are propagating, they ball up, and when they ball up, they form impaction, right? So a lot of times you see these things, sometimes some of them get passed out just one at a time. Sometimes, depending on what your diet is, it might allow the muscle tissue to become very smooth for a period of time, and out they all come. Okay, yes.
Do you think it's common for people to get infected here in the US?
Not really.
With,
We do see them. I mean, I have seen cases, but usually it's pinworm. I've seen an Ascaris case, which is this thing, of a lady who came in, and I was working for a doctor at the time, and she said, I've had this horrible congestion, and I feel like the back of my throat is tickled all the time. And I looked back there and I saw it. I saw the worm back there. And I went to the doc and I said, the lady in whatever has a scares in the back of her throat. She said, you're kidding. I said, no. So she went back there and looked, and sure enough it was. She said, go ahead and pull it out. And so I grabbed a pair of long tweezers, and I got back there and I pulled on it, and we told the lady, we said, there is an object in the back of your throat we're gonna pull out. We didn't tell her worm because we didn't want her to get nervous, right? But when I pulled it out and she saw it, she fainted because she just didn't think. It was aspirated into her lungs, right? So what does that mean, aspirated? So you were, I don't know, she eating and talking at the same time, and and some of the stuff went into her lungs, and probably that's how the ova got in there, and then it became an adult, and it was growing in her lungs. And all the mucus and all the pus she was producing from her lungs came from that one worm. She was lucky she didn't get a secondary bacterial infection.
Yeah.
Did you get it all the way out?
We think we got it all out, and there was no problem after.
Yeah.
I knew I got the entire worm out, but were there others? We didn't think so.
Did they image her or to see if they could see it?
They went ahead and imaged and couldn't see anything.
Disgusting.
It happens. Yep.
Can that damage the lungs, like severely, except
Yeah,
if you
Depending on what organism it is. This one, not so much, but this one, yes. This is a hookworm. This one is a bad boy. It can chomp on anything it comes in contact with. It has these things that look like teeth, and they're not like our teeth, but they are keratinized. So they can use that to, look, this is it, hooking on into the intestinal mucosa, right? So this is fascinating how these, now this is the one, anybody grow up country here? If you grew up country, this is the one that your grandparents or your parents said, Jen, don't go walking out in the field barefooted because this organism can penetrate the soft tissues of the toes and get into your body that way.
My country relatives never told me that.
Maybe y'all had a very clean ranch.
Mississippians. Maybe they didn't know.
Could be.
You know?
Okay. Trichinospiralis is the bad boy of the entire group. This causes skeletal muscle infections, and it's very painful. Anybody watch Monsters Inside Me?
Yeah.
So if you watch Monsters Inside Me, there's an episode there where there's a couple of people from the US who go up to Canada, and then they go into Alaska, and then in Alaska they're hunting caribou, but at night they're with a guide, and a black bear comes into their tank and attacks them, and the guide shoots the black bear. In Alaska, there's a law that says if you shoot a bear, you have to report it, and you have to provide the hide to the game warden, but you can do whatever you want with the meat. Now, they didn't want to get rid of the meat, so what they did was they had a big old cookout, and they invited everybody from the village to come and eat, and many of them came down with trichinella because they didn't cook the meat all the way through. I think 30 people came down with trichinosis. It's a skeletal muscle infection.
There's monsters inside me.
Yeah, you
It's on the
can't
Discovery
handle
Channel. It's fabulous to watch.
Sounds really
I
good.
go there, I'm eating popcorn, I'm thinking, okay, this is what they have. And I have a list of things, I'm like, okay, which one is
I
it?
bet it's interesting for you
It's
because
very
you can
good.
try to figure it out what it is before the end of that. I used to love that show.
It's still great. That's good. Okay? So this, you can see they form little cysts in our tissue and our muscle tissue. Now this is different than the cysts that we were talking about for the protozoans, which is the dormant, refractive, protective state of the protozoan. This is a fluid-filled sac. Okay? Good?
Can you repeat that?
So the cyst of a protozoan is the dormant, refractive, protective state of the protozoan. This cyst, spelled the same way, is a fluid-filled sac. However, you can see the immature worm in it. Now there are all kinds of cysts that can develop in the body, right? You can have fibromas, which are not really bad, right? They're benign. But you can have sarcomas or carcinomas, and those are bad. Those are cancer. But you can also have things like lipomas. You can have the sebaceous glands get clogged, and you can have a cyst with that kind of secretion in there, and sometimes they'll just pop, and you can just do this forever. I had a friend who came over to the house and said, I need you to look at something that was right under her breast, and it was a cyst, and it started to ooze, and she said, do you know what this is? I said, yeah, it's a sebaceous cyst. And she says, can you do anything about it? I said, sit down, and I just started pushing on it, and all of the secretions, and that smells bad. But I was just pushing her. I pushed on it for 30 minutes, and I think I got it all out, right? And so, yeah, you can.
So the point is, like, the cysts can be different, like, you know, there's.
Yeah,
so
there can
many
be all
different
kinds of
types
different cysts. Mhm.
And in this case, the organism is alive inside the cyst. It doesn't mean like we're talking about what we were talking about, where that is inactive.
Correct.
This is active.
Correct.
Okay.
All different kinds of cysts. Okay? All right, now this is the pinworm. How many people have pinworms? Raise your hand. Nobody in here has had pinworms. Really? I don't believe you. I think every one of you had it. Very common. So this is the one where you see little kids scratching their bahankas, or they're by the door doing like that, you know. It causes anal itch. But in very rare cases, it can cause a prolapsed rectum. Usually the rectum is an innie, it becomes an outie, and this is the rectum right there. And the worms are on it. You see the little worms all over? Right? They're very tiny. They're approximately, I don't know, maybe 1 centimeter in length, but you can see them. And sometimes, right, this is an image showing this guy, and the worms are all in the intestinal tract. They come out of the anus when you're at rest. They lay their ova, then they come back in. Sometimes the female gets lost, and she'll crawl down your leg, and then you'll see them. Or they'll end up on the bed sheets, and then you'll know, right? Look at your oh, hell no, not this one. But I mean, they're very common.
How do they cause the prolapse rectum?
So it is the enzymes that are being produced and the mucilage that are being produced, it interacts and causes a hypersensitivity of inflammation.
Is that fixable?
Is it what?
Fixable? Can
Oh,
people
absolutely.
fix it? Yeah.
Take an antihelmintic,
Goes
and
back in?
you can take corticosteroids for the inflammation here. Alright, but you don't push it back in. Right? It just goes in.
Well, I was
by
like,
itself.
is it surgical? Like I
Well,
wasn't-
no, it's not like a hemorrhoid, you know, where you might lance a hemorrhoid. This is the
Just
anus.
inflammation.
You know what? Yeah, okay, good? All right. This is Gyrofilaria immitis. This is a heartworm. So for those of you who have dogs, you need to be treating your dogs on a monthly basis against heartworm. And the best way to do that is to treat for heartworm, but also to treat for the vectors by which come and feed on your dog, and it can transmit the infectious agent to them, mosquitoes. Okay, fleas, those kind of things. Okay. So now the last group of organisms we're going to talk about are the exoparasites. Now remember, I told you that the exoparasites are more of a nuisance than anything. I don't really fear them at all. They look kind of cool to me, but mostly they're a nuisance. But they act as vectors, and to me the vectors are much more important than the actual parasite itself. So we're looking at insects and arachnids. The difference is, besides many things, but the easy way to tell them apart is 6 legs for insects and 8 legs for arachnids. Okay? So if we take a look at this, here's one of my favorite organisms. It is the louse. This is the body louse, and so you can see this is interesting because in my day, if you had lice, right, they would just, if you had lice, they would just come in, they would check, and they would say, okay, come on. And you would go down the hallway, the walk of shame, and out you would go because you had lice, okay?
For me.
Okay. Nowadays, you can't really do that. They used to put them in the principal's office, and then the mama or the daddy could come pick them up. Now you don't even do that. They stay in the classroom because they don't want to affect the feelings or the mental capacity of a child. So my sister got lice when she was in the 4th grade, and I came home after school one day, and I was just starting high school, and I came in and my mom was in the tub with my sister. My sister had long, beautiful hair like yours.
It's such a pain.
So my mom had washed with Linday, killed the organism, but now had to go in there and pull them out. And some of them got away and were crawling around the bathtub, right? And then you had to get the nits. You had to get the nits out also, right? In some cultures, if you watch them, they're helping each other, right? They're looking at each other and they're taking them out and they're popping them right there, and then they drop and they kill them, right? Well, so my mom said, please help me, because, you know, she had hair like that, and so we were in there pulling out. My brother came in and, what are y'all doing? And my brother is squeamish. So I grabbed some of the ones that were running around down there, and I said, look. And they crawled on my hand. He looked at me and he goes, and he fainted. I got him back up. He moved out for 6 months. Gone. Because he didn't want to live in any house that had lice. My dad found out my sister had lice and my mom was gone, and my dad just cut her hair off. So she went from having beautiful hair like that to having really, really short hair. My mom was pissed. But my dad didn't stop there. My brother and I, who had hair like Christian's hair, all got flat tops. Right. You know? So nobody's getting lice again.
No one has hair.
Kinda works, right?
And so back in the day, you would line up and go into the gymnasium, and there'd be 2 nurses there, and you would sit down and they would look through your hair to make sure you didn't have any lice. They don't do that anymore.
That happened when I was in school.
Because they didn't want you to have lice.
Also, my friend is a teacher. She's a 2nd grade teacher at IDEA right over here, and she had a kid last year who had lice, and they did send him home, but they all got lice. And like before she found out she had lice, she came to my house, and then I'm like washing all my blankets, anything she touched, like all the pillows. Like
It's just better to sterilize everything, right?
It's just very annoying. But the kid, The kid did
There
stay
is-
home until he was.
There is a very big outbreak of lice in Austin, Texas right now.
Which is why they should sell Jack.
So
How do
if
you
you,
know?
because I keep up with all of the outbreaks, I get special emails every morning telling me what's going on.
So is it just like schools?
It's an area of town.
Well, you wanna share where?
Wouldn't they still do like standard delousing for like the military inductees
I don't know,
in jail?
I
Oh,
don't,
that's bad.
do we have any military folks in here? I don't know about, you know, even the military's gotten a little bit, you know, oh, we don't wanna do that, right?
Yeah.
So, if you'll notice, the body louse can hold on to any hair on the body except not the pubic hair and not the eyebrow. So hold up your hair like this, just, so it's got a hook, it can hook onto like this and hold on to the hair. Are you with me? And then it can take blood meals from you constantly. That's different than its cousin, right? This is what it looks like when you have them, and that's what it looks like on some hair. But its cousin is majestic, look at him. That is the crab louse. The crab louse is specialized. It will only infest the pubic area, right? And so we as scientists were very worried. Now, if you notice, he doesn't have a little hook, he has a whole claw, a pincher. Look at him. So, and he needs that because the hair of the pubic area is more oval in morphological design. So it needs that to be able to hold on to the hair. We were worried, Clarissa, that the crab louse was going to become extinct because lots of people are, you know, fashionably taking care of their areas, manicuring them or whatever, right? And we're like, oh no, the crab louse is going to. But then somebody found that they were living in the eyebrow. And some people found that they were living on the eyelash. Because of the morphology of the hair there is very similar to the morphology in the pubic area. So now we're not so much worried, right? But, you know, it could be a problem, right? You don't want to walk around with crab louse in your eyebrow. Right? That could be problematic, right? So all you need is love. Look at this. So that crab louse is still considered a sexually transmitted infection or infestation. Mhm. Even though it's really rare. It's more likely that people will get it by sharing clothes than they will by having sex. Okay? Because, like, think about it, guys. If you're about to engage and you see all these little bite marks around the area, you're like, perhaps we should watch a movie instead. Let's not do this, right?
Gotta go.
Bed bugs. So there is also an infestation outbreak of bed bugs in Austin, Texas. Right? So if you wake up in the morning and you have all these welts, it was not one hungry mosquito. You got hit by bed bugs. So the definition of parasite is got to live on you, right? Here it's kind of on the outskirts of that because they don't live on you, but they live with you. So you're asleep at night, you're giving off heat, and you're giving off CO2, the bed bugs can sense it. And they'll come up wherever they are, usually in the bed itself, and they'll come and take a blood meal. If you wake up in the morning and you look like this, again, you've been hit by bed bugs. Bed bugs are the great stowaways. You can go on a trip somewhere, stay somewhere, the bed bugs are there, they get in your purse or your luggage, and then you bring them home, right? And then they're in your house, right? And the only way to get rid of them is to raise the temperature 120 degrees for 4 hours. The only effective way to do it. You spray for them, you'll kill whatever gets hit by the insecticide, but you're not gonna get them all. Because a lot of them are inside of the bed.
Is it 140 or 100?
140, yeah.
So what do you do, get rid of your mattress?
You could do that, but they're probably in your carpet or what. So I had an ex-student call me and say, Provi, can you come help us? We have this huge problem with roaches, and my landlord won't do anything. So I went to Walmart, bought a whole bag of diatomaceous earth. I was gonna go and treat her house for her, and I said, show me the roaches. And she said, well, they're in the lights. And I looked and I said, those are kind of small.
How
She
big
said,
are they?
they're also coming out of the baseboard and everywhere. And I looked at them, I picked one up, I'm like, I said, I can't treat for these. You just need to move, because these are bed bugs. And she said, but I've already told my landlord and he won't give me back my deposit. And so I tell him, you need to tell your landlord that he is in breach of contract because you have an infestation of bed bugs and it's not your fault, you just moved in. And so then I wrote a letter on top of that, signed it Felix Villarreal, microbiologist, and I gave it to him, and I told him basically that I was gonna report him to the health authorities. He gave her back her money. And as we were leaving, I said, tell your neighbors that the reason that you're leaving is because there are bed bugs in the facility. Because if they're in your place, they're going to migrate to their place pretty quickly. You can burn the bed, but they're still in the house. Are you with me?
Yeah, but what if it's so bad, I mean, if it's covered in the house, like, you have no choice but.
Heat it up to, 120 would probably work. Huh?
Celsius or Fahrenheit?
No, Fahrenheit. Oh, no, Celsius, oh, no.
I was like, oh my
I'm not gonna get that high. Okay. Here is the arachnida. The tick is one of my favorite organisms. Look at the proboscis, it's reticulated. Oh my God. So that thing gets in you, look, it's not ever gonna come out. It's hard, right? So it's gonna stay in you for as long as possible. The only way to really remove a tick effectively is to take some tweezers, go down where the proboscis comes through, and pull up until it finally lets go. You do not wanna pierce it, burn it, suffocate it, because if it has Lyme disease in it, it's gonna regurgitate that into you, and then you're gonna have to deal with that, right? So it's very important that we understand that that tick is just doing what it normally does, but we wanna be sure that we do not give it an opportunity to transmit an infectious agent to us.
They're really bad.
Reticulated means like.
It's reticulated means it's got these little kind of protrusions that make it hard to get rid of. Okay? All right, so here's scabies. So yeah, this
I've had
little
scabies.
yeah, this little guy is something else. So he gets in you, and what he does is he burrows inside of your skin. He goes in there, he lays the eggs, he comes back out, feeds on exfoliated skin, takes a little bit of blood meal, goes back in, nourishes the eggs, and then you have a problem. Right? You can treat this with Linday and get rid of them. A lot of times we just take scrapings from the skin, we look for pieces of insect or feces or whatever, and then we can treat you. Right? But you have to get rid of the clothes because they're in the clothes. Right? And so it can be problematic. A cousin to it in Texas is the chigger, right? Jin, have you had an experience with chiggers yet?
I think so, not too long ago, actually, it's really uncomfortable.
Oh, very uncomfortable. How about it, Isabella? I'm asking the people who are kind of new to Texas.
I've never heard of that.
You gotta go play in the bushes.
Oh, go in the earth right now or in the early spring, walk into the Bermuda grass and you'll get them. They love the Bermuda grass. Yes.
Actually, I have a question for that. So I had it like in my leg area and my lymph node kind of swollen.
It shouldn't do that. They don't really cause infection.
Interesting. There's something different wrong.
That happened
So-
to me too, though.
Huh?
My groin area where they bit me because they like your panty area. And
They
stuff.
like any place that's got some type of a barrier or so around the sock, around the underwear, bra, like all those places.
But,
So
like
that's
I
what-
got in the lymph nodes in the groin area, I got swollen too.
Did you really?
from
Well,
chiggers.
maybe I'm off.
Yeah.
But this is what they look like, you know? And we call them red bug here in Texas because they're red, but also the little bites they produce are these things. Now, they are not like scabies. Scabies has evolved with us. The chiggers do not live well with us. They don't like us very much. They say, oh, here's a house, well, I don't really like it here. They're too warm. And so then they kind of disembark and you wash them off or whatever. But the itchiness, because of the allergic reaction and the reaction of the immune system, it's itchy because of what's happened with the saliva that they use to take the blood.
These typically last a lot longer, right?
About 2 weeks.
Use a medication for that.
You could. It's lindane. I mean, So again, I'm more interested in the insects and the arachnids as vectors, right? So you have the louse, Q fever, flea, plague, housefly, which can give you salmonella, right? Land on your food, drop off salmonella, and then you eat your food, you get sick. And then again, the Regeviad bug, right? The kissing bug, and that can give you Chagas disease we talked about last time, right?
What
That's
was
what's
the
important.
louse again?
This one over here?
Yeah, what was that?
Q fever?
Lice.
Q fever?
Q fever?
Uh-huh. So here, there are two types of vectors. There's a mechanical vector, like the roach or the housefly. They are contaminated, they land on poo, then they land on your food, then they essentially, contaminate your food. This weekend, not only did I visit with my family, but I visited with some friends from high school. And one of them told me, Corpus is so bad about roaches. Remember I told you they're so big that you hear them flying. But she said, I remember growing up, because we grew up in an area where there were a lot of roaches. And she said, I can remember growing up and I'd be putting my cereal in my milk and then a roach would fall out into my milk. And so that's the common thing, right? Because there's just so many of them. But again, it's a mechanical vector. Different than a biological vector. Biological vector takes a blood meal. When it takes a blood meal, it injects the organism into your body. Okay? Like a mosquito. Okay? And which mosquito is this? It has these bands on its legs?
Female.
Aedes. Right? So again, if you think about it, right, mosquitoes transmit malaria. Here in Texas, we're not worried about malaria. We're worried about West Nile, and in some cases Zika, right? Ticks can transmit Lyme disease, and fleas can transmit plague. And we do have approximately 2 cases of plague in Texas on an annual basis, usually west of I-35. Okay? Good? So here are the 3 different species of mosquitoes. I will expect you to know them, right? Aedes, Anopheles, Culex. The difference between them, Aedes is easy. Why?
Stripes.
It's got the stripes on the legs. Anopheles is a very rotund mosquito. It's chunky. And Culex is a very, very diminutive, very small mosquito, right? And they feed at different times of the day. So if you're out there in the morning, you can get bit by one genera. If you're out there in midday, you get bit by another. And if you're out there in the evening, another one will take blood from you. Okay? Ladies and gentle dudes, I am done with parasitology. The only thing left to do is virology, and then we're ready for our 3rd exam. Any questions? Yes.
The Anopheles was the fat one, and the Culex was the
It's a little diminutive one. It's small.